right. It's time. Greg has done it again. Greg is here. This one is Alien Skulls Are Real. This is a third video in his series called History is a Lie. And you're seeing the slow, progressive, brain melt that this content caused. By the time we get to this video, which if you haven't seen this stuff, you should go back. The VODs and stuff are on the YouTube channel. Which link in the see, it's in chat right now. The YouTube is on chat right now. If you haven't seen this, worth going back and watching the other videos, but you don't really need more context. He'll say you do to get his conspiracy theory stuff, but essentially he's a conspiracy theorist. There's just no two ways about it. So here's that video. Alien Skulls Are Real. Let's see what he gets into. Whew, loud.
Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another...
bro. What the fuck are we doing? What are we doing, Gregory?
Another episode of Tinfoil Helmet, the series where I just let loose and have fun with some of my favorite conspiracy theories. I began my YouTube journey by breaking my head out of the dogma of religion, embracing science and logic, and rejecting the Bible. Certainly, a lot has happened since then. I still don't believe in the God of the Bible, but kind of come full circle on this whole thing here. I'm starting to notice that there might be something more to the universe than what science can describe.
Oh, do ya? You do, huh? Very skeptical.
And I've also come to realize that some of the stories in the Bible, and I mean the really, really crazy ones, are actually true. But first, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video.
Cool.
Art is
cool.
In auto
Cool.
TV,
Great Shadow Legends. Wow.
Even you waiting
for cringe.
Graham to
wow, that's just
series. And I'll see you there. In my first video in this series, I pointed out some enigmas in history and suggested that our current knowledge of the progression of humanity isn't exactly accurate. I talked about how a comet hit Greenland somewhere around 12,000 years ago.
He talked about the mud flood too, right?
Of the last ice age. And this would have caused a large cataclysm culminating in a giant global flood. It wasn't just Noah who recorded a flood story. Dozens of cultures around the world have similar flood myths.
Dozens of cultures have similar flood myths because of humans' closeness to water during the creation of these proto-cultures and these city-states, these really early civilization stuff. Not all of them have flood myths. Some of them have monsoon season myths, you may recall. Some of them have storm seasons. Some of them have seasonal flood myths that they can predict. You'll see, for instance, the difference in Nile worship is much more cyclical and seasonal, to where the Indus River Valley is sometimes more chaotic because it was a floodplain and they had monsoons, or the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates that had chaotic floods that just blast people. I mean, you saw floods recently in Turkey? Was it Turkey? Somewhere, I can't remember recently. But you can. All my followers dropped off, and now they're back. Weird. I think they're doing something on the dashboard. It distracted the shit out of me. Anyway, you see these reflected, and then you see in places where they don't flood. Guess what? No one has flood myths. Isn't that wild?
Even cultures that had no contact with each other. We used to believe that civilization began.
They live next to fresh water, Dave. I said Dave. It happened again because we just watched Dave. No, Greg.
And around 6,000 years ago with Sumeria, but we recently found a site called Göbekli Tepe, which dates back around 11,000 years. And to put into perspective how long ago that was, Jesus was 2,000 years ago. Well, Sumeria was 3 Jesuses ago. For as long ago as Sumeria was for us, Göbekli Tepe was for the Sumerians. But even the Sumerians knew they weren't the first civilization. They told us about the older civilization.
Yeah,
we just couldn't have known it would be that old. Recently, I've heard a lot of conspiracy theorists suggest...
Well, they didn't tell us about Göbekli Tepe. Like, if they did, they told us about the ruins of that kind of shit. Like, of course they knew they came from somewhere. How does he think these people existed 3 Jesuses ago? Like, it is so weird to, like, look at these civilizations and think, yep, that was the first time this ever happened. No, this is the first time it fucking worked. They've been other places. They've tried other times. Like, there are places that you could find no archaeological evidence for because they either picked up and moved everything because they needed a lot of the shit, or like all burned down, or it got washed the fuck away, or there was a fucking war, or it just rotted over time. It didn't stick around because they didn't have like stonework. It was like wood and it just rotted. And they had worse shelters. Like, we know that there's like since the agricultural revolution, and likely many years before that, like leading into it, as they sort of like got around semi-farming, what you would consider like early whoopsie, I know if I come back here it'll be a perennial, you feel me, like wheat. The structures there wouldn't have stayed like, but those people had context, obviously, of their other their family, their direct lineage. Like, these people moved in tribes almost always because, of course, right? Of course that's how it would work. Like, I don't know. It's just, as for a skeptic to like just wholesale not even like talk to historians about how they come up with like their ideas about stuff, like anthropologists pore over this data, and they, you know, they have colleagues and they have like all this other work to reference and stuff. Like, it's an exhaustive, like, soft science to interpret this kind of stuff. And he just is like, nah, but what if it was fucking not that at all? What if it was totally different? Is Armoured Skeptic a sarcastic name now? I mean, he certainly doesn't deserve it.
Yes, that Göbekli Tepe was actually founded by the survivors of Atlantis, and that Atlantis predated that. The site appears to have rock carvings that some people have interpreted to be depicting a comet impact. I absolutely believe that the concept of civilization existed before Göbekli Tepe and was taught to us by a mysterious group.
Holy
what the ancient
fucking
Egyptians
shit.
refer to as Zep Tepe, or the first time. So who were these givers of civilization? Well, according to the Bible and the Book of Enoch, it was the Watchers, or the fallen angels, the sons of God, and they came down and took daughters of men as wives, human wives. Yes.
You're on literally Ancient Alien stuff. This is literally just Ancient Aliens. Greg Papadopoulos. Wait, what's that guy's name? Stephanopoulos. Nope. Giorgio Papadopoulos. Ancient Aliens guy. What's his name? Giorgio Tsoukalos? I didn't get it at all. I wasn't even close. He's Swiss. Giorgio no, fuck off. Tsoukalos, I think. You're just that guy. But somehow less charismatic. Isn't that wild?
It's all true, and I will prove it. They called these Watchers and their hybrid offspring the Nephilim, or the men of old, the men of renown. Another
No, pickles, thanks for the biddies. There is no human accomplishment that weird conspiracy bros will not belittle. I get it, Greg. You've accomplished... Ooh, whoa. Gnome Pickles taking a cheap shot. Whoa. I'll leave it there, Greg. All right. This guy starting this nonsense was Eric Van Daniken. That's his name?
Translation for that word is giants, which is technically a mistranslation of the word, but I assure you, they were giants. According to Enoch, in his books, It was the Watchers that taught us everything. They taught us how to work stone, make tools, make weapons, make war. But probably most importantly, they taught us astrology to help us tell the times and the seasons, which is also the basis for all of our religions. Some of the oldest Paleolithic cave paintings depict a large, white, giant race of alien-looking beings. Multiple cultures around the world have similar stories about giant albino people who came out of the ground or out of caves and taught them everything.
And taught them everything. Taught them everything. I mean, you could explain this very simply by the existence of me. People who look like me and my descendants. Had to start somewhere, man. The whites probably spooked them. This is just racism, Greg. Paleolithic racism. They're just drawing my people in caricature. Or it could be literally just any other thing. Maybe they're not fucking white. Maybe the medium in which they use is white. Who knows, man? Maybe this is just the way they decided. Maybe this is a kid, bro. Who knows? You're speculating.
So, is there any evidence that the Nephilim actually existed?
Good evening. No.
That's right, motherfuckers. We're doing elongated skulls.
It has the juice?
He's doing elongated skulls. I told you. Gregory Fearher over here. Oh, got him. He probably hasn't heard that before. Wow, what a mic drop. He did it again. He got me. Sheesh, goosebumps. Sheesh. Let's do it. Angel Phrenology, I'm in.
We've all seen depictions of the evolution of humans.
It's me right here.
I think we can all picture in our heads how we can go from...
Is that Chuck?
Depictions of the evolution of humans.
Is Chuck right here?
I think we can all pick...
Look at that. That's Chuck fucking Norris. This is literally his profile. This is just a Chuck Norris joke.
Picture in our heads how we can go from this...
This is armor sketching now? Oh, yeah.
To this, to this.
Oh, yeah. If you haven't seen any of the other videos I've done, this is the 3rd episode of his series. I'm doing them all. They're on the YouTube if you want to check them out. They're all fucking crazy.
But how the hell do you go from this to this? You can find elongated skulls in quite a few places around the world, but the two greatest concentrations appear to be Eurasia around the Black Sea and Caspian Sea area, as well as South America near the coast of Peru. You can probably find a handful of mainstream articles talking about some of these smaller conehead skulls. A lot of them are just normal humans who have bound their head, but some of these skulls are so large, you can't help but notice the discrepancy.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. You know what I imagine here? I think that this is probably. I bet if you looked at this, not only would it be human, but they would have a mutation. This just seems like a genetic mutation that probably got mostly bred out of our genetics, but seems to have popped up a couple times in cultures. And they obviously took note of it because they took care of the bodies. I wonder if those people led normal lives. I wonder what their brain development was like. What's the cavity inside look like?
That doesn't look like it's...
Is that skin on there? That's fucking crazy.
Just head binding. I believe that these cone-headed giants served as a ruling class, and they preferred to inbreed, much as the ruling class does today, to maintain their bloodline. But in Peru, at least, over time, the skulls started off very large, but then slow...
You know how evolution works, Greg. How do you not describe this as a human... like a human mutation? Cone-headed giant. I mean, look, they look like normal-sized skulls.
Slowly became smaller. Likely this is because they were forced to breed with the indigenous people they were ruling over more and more over time. So what the f*** even are these things? Are they even human? I mean, don't get me wrong, I love alien culture. I'm all about that Area 51 but there's no such thing as ancient aliens. A couple million years ago, the ancestors of we Homo sapiens started off...
If he says there's no such thing as ancient aliens, then everything he says that agrees with them, he doesn't do.
as an ape-looking hominid, then evolved to
The
fully
Watchers came,
upright walking, tool-using
What are
humans
the Watchers,
to
Greg?
the civilization living Homo sapiens we are today. Well, I have some bad news for you. This chart is straight up propaganda. Don't worry, I'm not saying evolution didn't happen. It just didn't happen like this. First of all, have you ever thought of the implications of having Neanderthal standing behind Homo sapien in the line? That implies that Neanderthal is less evolved than Homo sapiens. And this is also supposed to implant a subconscious seed in your mind that more ape-like features equals less evolved. But Neanderthal was not less evolved than Homo sapien. Neanderthals were our closest cousins who shared a common ancestor with us going back about 500,000 years ago. When Neanderthal existed, they were literally exactly as evolved as we were. And Neanderthal only died off around 30,000 years ago, which is actually pretty relatively recently. Neanderthals are so similar to us that if they were alive today, they could probably just blend into crowded New York City, and you probably just think that there's some Italian mook. Hey, I'm freaking walking here. You guys get it.
Stray caught by the Italians on that one. Sheesh. Sorry, Italians. A bit forced. Yeah, I don't know why he decided to do that. I mean, I think it would be cool, an alternate universe where the Neanderthal population doesn't go extinct. I wonder why. I wonder why they did. My suspicion, a sickle cell-like situation, and also the obvious one is that they got bred out. There's a bit of both. But I would bet that there's some kind of shared genetics that affected that population to some extent. Unless they were just killed on sight, like profiled racially. It could be that. Because they did look different. I don't know.
Basically, as our ancestors' brains grew
we've always been
over
fucked
the
up little
millennia,
animals,
their
so.
jaw bones and jaw muscles had to shrink to accommodate the new skull size. The smaller their jaws got, the more space they had for brains. Gorillas have a fin on the top of their skull, and all the empty space around it where our brains would go is just a giant mass of jaw muscle. Basically, this chart is trying to place waspy Western Europeans as the peak of evolution and imply that anybody with more ape-like features like a prominent brow, a sloped-back face, an oversized jaw, giant ears, all of these features become justifications to treat people like they're less intelligent, less evolved, less valuable. For example, even today, I've seen people use this conception of beauty to poke fun of the more defined features we see in the skulls of Aboriginal people that live around the oceanic islands of Australia and New Zealand. I remember as a kid hearing that the reason that the oceanic...
He's walking around and being like, you know what, phrenology is bad. Here's my 5 on phrenology.
I hope you have
Elahari, thanks to the prime.
People look this way was because their ancestors interbred with Homo erectus. But I don't buy this. Certainly they would have more unique Homo erectus DNA because they were an isolated people. They had actually been isolated in those islands for 50,000 years. But also the hooked bone on the bottom of the skull, called the mastoid process, it's very pronounced. Almost more pronounced than this waspy ass looking skull that they put it next to. However, Homo erectus didn't have a mastoid process at all. So if they interbred with Homo erectus, that bone should be a little bit smaller. No. The large hook bone, the prominent brow, these are all features of another Homo species. Scientists that study the Aboriginals now still maintain that they have unique DNA, but it's because they've interbred with some other unknown, unidentified hominid group.
This is the same thing, Greg. Now you're saying, no. I mean, racists used to say that this group of people look this way because they bred with the monkeys. But nope, actually they bred with aliens. They bred with the giants, the slope-headed giants, you see? That's better. Look, I totally think it's the genetic isolation, in my opinion. I think it's the genetic isolation on the island. Like, they had certain kinds of people move and emigrate to the, or when it broke off, they just got isolated. I don't know how it worked. Probably a little both. And those people bred on the island of Australia and the neighboring areas for well, not millions, but yeah, probably millions of years, because they probably weren't even people when it started. It took millions of years to isolate Australia. So yeah, I mean, like, of course, I think that's just what it is, just different path. Anyway, small populations change faster. Yeah, but small genetically isolated you'd start to see just the changes that would happen when you have, millions or hundreds of thousands, I don't know how many were on the population, but whatever that population was on that island, as it fluctuated throughout, the island continent of Australia for millions of years. Yeah, it makes sense why the people that live there look a little bit different than the people who don't live there, but like, I don't think it was the alien slope skull people. Anyway.
I know who they were. They were these large ape-like people who had cone heads and large protruding jaws. This is one of their idols. The biggest mystery is, even though that this ethnic group was completely isolated for 50,000 years, the vast majority of Australian Aboriginals speak a language that was introduced only 4,000 years ago. Well, yeah, it could be a mystery, but it's not. It's these giant cone-headed people. They taught them the language.
What?
Now, we Homo sapiens shared the earth with Neanderthals and other...
It's not a mystery. It was the giant cone-headed people that taught language. They certainly couldn't have come up with their own language. To think the Aboriginal population could come up with their own language. No. It was the aliens. Jesus Christ. Impossibly large orifice. Thanks for the 14 months. Welcome.
Human species for tens of thousands of years. And I know that it's your instinct to assume that everybody back then was way dumber than they are today. But that's not true. They were all exactly as self-aware and intelligent as you are. Neanderthal, for example, had upwards of 10 or 15% more brain mass than the average human. I know that does not mean that they're smarter. And also, we interbred with many different species of humans. Almost everybody on Earth except for sub-Saharan Africans have Neanderthal DNA. And all of this interbreeding we've done over the years is what has resulted in what we now call Homo sapien. Archaeologists and anthropologists will tell you that these are normal human beings who have had their heads bound after birth so that their skull would grow into a cone shape. And though that certainly seems to be true for the vast majority of these skulls, there are a few that are so large. Number 1, the largest of the elongated skulls have at least 30 or 40% larger brain capacity than a modern human. This was tested by filling some of these skulls with rice and then measuring the volume that fit inside. Binding a skull...
Why don't you just... Well, I mean, nowadays, have they 3D mapped the inside of this?
...will not make the brain grow 30% larger. This has to be a genetic trait. Number 2, when we're born, our skulls are segmented and soft. As we grow up, it fuses together and hardens, leaving suture lines. These larger skulls are missing their sagittal suture line completely. Head binding will not do that. That has to be a genetic trait. Number 3, the foramen magnum is the hole in the bottom of your skull that connects your brain stem to your spinal cord. Normally, it's somewhere near the center of your skull, helping to balance the weight of your head on your shoulders. However, on elongated skulls, it's almost all the way to the back.
Sounds like this person had some developmental problems. it maybe affected something else.
This accommodates for the extra weight for the larger skull, and it appears on some of these skulls the foramen magnum is even smaller than a normal human skull, suggesting that they had very thin skeletons, which seems to be the case in the few surviving examples of full skeletal remains. And the head of their infants is almost the
Do you know why it's an infant? It probably had fucking problems, and they didn't have medicine at the time to deal with this shit.
exact same size as their torso. Like, this is insane.
It's a dead infant for a reason. It didn't live into a vast fucking life.
It's so alien looking. Binding a skull will not change the size or location of a foramen magnum.
This fucking ancient skull mutation plus probably the skull binding on top of it, since they were already doing it in the area. Like, both of those things combined, probably not a great existence. And Greg out here just kind of just making fun of this kid.
Has to be a genetic trait. Number 4, many of the larger skulls have extra holes on the tip of the cone near the back. These were almost certainly holes for blood vessels. Their brain was so large that a second blood supply was needed to feed the top. You do not get this from binding a skull. This has to be genetic. Number 5, the mastoid process, that little hook on the bottom of the skull I was talking about before. This bone is actually an anchor point for several of the muscles in your neck. These hooks are noticeably larger on the elongated skulls, much thicker. And again, this is to accommodate their larger head size. Head binding does not make these bones larger. That has to be a genetic trait.
Okay. I feel like ritually binding your head for multiple generations would select the people that were good for that process over the course of time, right? It's artificial selection pressure plus likely a mutation that aided in it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, man. Just immediately about skull sizes. Oh yeah, he's full on just thinking like Aboriginal people fucked aliens now because they must have.
Number 6, their lower,
and I guess Peruvians.
Jaw
Ancient Peruvians.
is enormous.
This one's not really so much a rule, but I have noticed that quite a few of these skulls have jaws that would put Arnold Schwarzenegger to shame.
But all that being said, the skulls are so perfectly round that on top of being genetically larger, I'm convinced that they also practiced head binding, probably by wrapping something flexible around their head like a leather strap. At first, it's possible that they were doing this to fit in better with the indigenous people that they were ruling over. But then, as their heads got smaller and smaller, it became a way to differentiate themselves more and more from.
This is just wild. Speaking of skull binding, I feel like people who helmet their babies to have round heads are just doing the same thing as skull binding effectively. Also, some cultures still practice head binding, and it was super widespread, including parents of France and Germany. Damn, I didn't know that. Thanks for the 200 biddies. I feel like, I don't know if this is true. I feel like it would have negative effects on the brain, but I don't know if that's true.
The native people. Number 7, they have an enormous ridge on their forehead, like a giant plate. My theory is that this is a sign of head binding. A lot of the bone that would have otherwise have grown outwards ended up growing up, like, say, a giant ape-like brow bone. Doing this would also stretch the eye sockets up and back, which is why their eye sockets are so large. And number 8, quite famously, Native Americans have dark black hair. Yet, most of the elongated skulls that still have hair have red hair.
Well, yeah. First of all, I'm not confident in the hair color staying for that long over the course of all these years. I mean, like, anything. This could be rust. That's dyed it over time. It could be oxidized in general. I don't know. But that said, like, we have the human mutation for this to occur. Sometimes this happens. Yeah.
Some of them are blonde. I do not believe that this is an alien, but this guy isn't entirely Homo sapien either. I'm forced to conclude that he is, at very least, a human hybrid.
What a fucking weird leap.
And yes, these are the real mummified remains of a Peruvian conehead.
And kind of fucking, like, low-key racist? Oh, these people look this way because they fucked aliens. It's kind of fucking weird, Greg.
These
Jesus.
people gave the Australian Aboriginals their language 4,000 years ago.
And they couldn't have thought of their own language. Couldn't have happened like any other culture. Nope, it was given to them. Do you see what I mean? This is why people say that ancient aliens, like, theories are, like, inherently racist. Is because they often take, I mean, the accomplishments of any civilization, good or bad, and they fucking hand it off to some alien instead because they couldn't possibly have come to the technology of like spoken language. What?
Before showing up on the shores of Peru 3,000 years ago. When I finally got around to looking at artist renditions of these people, it sent a lightning bolt through my brain. I started scouring the globe for signs of these people, and I knew that it was my destiny to uncover who they were. When I was done, I was genuinely surprised.
Oh fuck, I'm a conehead. So I got deep into this head binding thing a couple weeks ago, mostly because I was curious since I was born without a soft spot. And part of why it is something that needed to be corrected surgically is because of the developmental issues. But with skull binding, from what I read, it doesn't cause many adverse effects. Wow, thanks for the 200 biddies. I didn't realize I was going to have so much deep lore. Thank you.
By how many ethnicities these people influenced and even interbred with
I appreciate it.
over the millennia.
Yeah, I mean, you gave 200 biddies. That's fine. You're not spamming.
All started when I noticed the similarities
Dr. Gamble, however, is. Just kidding. Artist renditions, the most accurate source of information. True!
Between the Paracas people and the Easter Island heads.
Right.
Like the cone-headed leaders of Peru, Easter Island also had a ruling class that was ethnically distinct from the natives. We call them the long ears, and they gauged their ears. You know, gauging when you put a giant disc in your earlobe and stretch it out? That's another way that they were differentiating themselves from natives, showing that they had different physical features. So my theory is that these statues did not depict
They're not native
gods.
now?
They did not depict ethereal beings, but instead each one of these represented a specific person, like whoever was king or ruler or priest at the time. Perhaps the natives worshipped these people as gods. But they were real freaking people. There were different designs created over the years. The earliest ones were very blocky, and then they eventually evolved into these overly cartoonish ones.
These are 100% every time we've ever sculpted anything, it's only ever been in reference to humans exactly as they exist. That's why the Renaissance isn't significant at all, because we've done it throughout history. It's always been 100% accurate throughout human history. The Renaissance is not even important at all. It's not significant in any way.
Have big gauged ears that start at the brow line.
That's right.
They have a big sloped back face, oversized jaw, and their eyes are deep set with a large brow. Most people don't know this. Every single one of these statues is designed to have a second piece. A large
penis.
Red stone that's placed on the head. When complete, these guys look exactly like the cone heads in Peru.
What? Just saying words. No. Exactly. No, they don't.
Sort of like they've got a mass of red hair wrapped around
looks like a hat.
I believe that they were making these Easter Island heads cartoonish to overemphasize just how ethnically different the rulers were from the native people. Like they were showing off how godly their features were.
Yeah.
And that reminded me of Pharaoh Akhenaten, who Egyptologists believe also overly cartoonified his body to differentiate himself from the people he was ruling over. However, I believe that he was emphasizing real physiological differences that he actually had. And honestly, I couldn't believe that I didn't notice this before. Just like the Easter Island heads, his statue has big ears that start at the brow line, a long sloped back face, an oversized jaw, deep set eyes, and also a funny beer belly. His statue is also depicted as wearing a giant cone hat, likely to make it appear as if he has a big cone head. In fact, most Egyptian gods and even...
Come on. This is... Come on. It looks like it was like a brief time in Egyptian history, bro. Sporadic occurrences. It looks like it became in vogue for a minute, probably because, I mean, they're on the continent of Africa. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how cosmetic modification proves the existence of people that they were modeling it after.
Many pharaohs were depicted as wearing long hats, and these long hats could easily be hiding cone heads. Akhenaten also often depicted his daughters and his wife Nefertiti as having long heads. And his son's skull, King Tutankhamun, is slightly elongated, but Nefertiti's skull was the largest of them all. Now, Akhenaten came way later than those big cone-headed people, but clearly he believed he was related to them. He was probably a distant relative, their bloodline preserved through the tradition of pharaohs inbreeding. The Easter Island statues also reminded me of something else that was kind of random, or at least I thought it was random. See, when they started digging these things up, they realized they weren't just heads, and the better preserved ones actually have arms that bend down and come together at their crotch. Their hands are clasping
the dick?
They're gentleman parts. Well, this is the oldest statue in the world. It was made at Göbekli Tepe. From the front, it seems...
I beg of you. We're all humans. Some of us have dicks. Like, this is such a normal human thing. I just can't... Like, two different cultures thought of someone holding their dick? I just can't I can't fucking believe it. I cannot believe that happened. Holy shit.
Eerily similar to the original Easter Island heads. It too has its arms bending down, and he's holding onto his stuff. Well, technically this isn't the oldest statue in the world because a lot of these T-pillars at Göbekli Tepe are actually supposed to represent people as well. Maybe the exact same people. They too are made out of white stone. Several of them have arms that are curved down and their hands are clasping. And I know that these people and their religion made it to the islands of Australia because this pillar also is wearing a design on his belt, and this design can only be found in one other place around the world. In rock art created by the Aboriginal people of Australia. Cool. And it was at this point in my research that I knew I was onto something. So here's my timeline. You're going to want to pay attention to this. Right. Göbekli Tepe is founded around 11,000 years ago. They create...
Göbekli Tepe. Where is it on the map? Here we go. Yeah, unlikely, bud. Unlikely. This here's This here's the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah, sorry, man. Those are just coincidences. I'm sorry. Sorry to tell you. That is highly unlikely that they made it 12,000 years ago. Australia was definitely fucking not. Did they? So they go down to Saudi Arabia. Hold on. Hold the phone. Let's try to figure this out. Before you do it, I'm going to do it. Okay.
It has the juice?
Okay. So this is... They had to get all the way down here from here. I'm sorry, bro. 12,000 years ago, Australia was essentially right fucking where it's at. Nope. I don't buy it. You have to walk all the way down here, and then you'd have to get on boats. You could cross this, but I mean, like, crossing the Indian Ocean seems unlikely, man. Sorry about it, Greg. I don't think that's what happened, my dude. The indigenous people of Australia have been there for 80,000 years. I was going to say, like, minimum. There's just no fucking way, man. Happened way before. I'd have to look at a... is there one of those... I don't know, tectonic sliding... tectonic timeline map. That should get me to what I'm trying to do. Can I go National Geographic and, like, load it up? Yeah, dude. Can I, like... 200 million years ago? Yeah, Australia's already off. 200 million years ago is when that would have to happen. So, yeah. It's not happening. Did it ever come up? Nope. Yeah. Sorry, man. I just don't think that was in the cards. I might give you 100 mil, but, you know. All right, let's hear it.
These white statues and white pillar people. Then, 2,000 years later, 9,000 years before today, the second oldest statue shows up in Jordan. Again, made from white stone, clearly a cone-headed figure, and there's several different versions of these, including a two-headed design, which might have represented a co-rulership, or maybe Siamese twins. Again, this confirms my theory that these are supposed to represent specific people, and not the same ethereal god every time. Then 2,000 years after that, 7,000 years ago today, these really weird ones show up, made from white stone again, and this time they have a separate material for the hair. Some of them seem to have lost the hair and just have a smooth cone.
They're really
and
weird.
It appears like they have alien eyes, but this is actually supposed to represent a prominent brow ridge and kind of a squint, or maybe Asian eyes. And this isn't a reptile's beak, but it's a snout, like a big ape's jaw. Now this is...
Fuck, man. All right.
It's cold.
All right. Jesus fucking Christ, Greg. 22Gs. Thanks for following. Okay, let's keep going. Jesus.
Is starting to make sense. These are the same kinds of features that we see in modern gorillas. They too can develop a cone head, though it's mostly fat and muscle. And obviously gorillas have long, slanted faces with a large, prominent jaw. And this reminded me of a statue in Japan that ancient alien folks have tried to convince us are some kind of lizard people. No, again, these are ape features, caricaturized. These have to be the same people that we see in these Paleolithic cave paintings of giant, white-skinned ape people. These are not aliens. These are albino ape people. These are members of a yet identified ape.
These are albino.
Skinned ape people. These are not aliens. These are albino ape people.
Could someone clip that and give it to me? I want it. I want that. I want that bad. Is it racist against white people to say this?
These are not aliens. These are albino ape people. These are members of a yet identified ape-like Homo species. I'm dead serious.
He's dead serious. Well, you've done my job for me. I don't have to prove you believe this stuff. You just obviously believe this stuff. This is wild shit, man. This is wild shit. I don't know why he has to have like some sort of grand unifying, like wouldn't it be interesting if the world was a D&D universe? Or like some kind of sci-fi book? Sure, that would be interesting. I can also conceive of very, very fraught and like really hard-won connections between these like anthropological data points. There's so much culturally that we just know about these people from every other aspect of history. Like, you don't just take one little piece and go like, oh, this looks like something else. You go, okay, that could look like something else, but like, what about all this other stuff? And like all the other stuff about the culture that you're saying this about just doesn't follow with, oh, and they also worshipped fucking slant-headed albino white folks. Real weird stuff, man. Real weird. It's like the principle of Occam's razor has been chucked right the fuck out. Baby and the bathwater. Pwander, thanks for the follow. Like, you straight up have to want to believe this stuff. That's why skeptic is a terrible term for you.
At first, I considered that these were maybe Neanderthals or Neanderthal hybrids, because my earliest research I found that Neanderthal is what introduced white skin, red hair, green eyes to the European people. But I've since changed that theory.
Why? Except for sub-Saharan Africa, which includes Peru, and it includes Aboriginal tribes in Australia, except for sub-Saharan Africa, and only the most isolated of sub-Saharan, every other culture, every other genetic line has Neanderthal blood in it, right? So wouldn't you say they have at least the recessive traits of Neanderthal things, Greg? Couldn't you see a situation where a group of isolated human beings that largely probably inbred started off with a mutation from the patriarch or matriarch or both, where they had slanty, long skulls, or each of them had the recessive gene to create one, just because of how fucking evolution works. And then from that, they had a long line of successful people because they probably were like, oh shit, this person's different. And that's weird. I don't know how to explain that, but they're totally fine. And now I revere that in some way, or respect them, or maybe they won that respect. I don't know, maybe they were dope. And now you have their offspring, because they successfully procreated in that community for hundreds of years because of how these ancient communities work. And of course they would get slowly less cone-like over time as they started to breed outside of that immediate family line. I mean, that is like just my first theory, right? And I think it's really hard for you to prove anything other than that, because it makes the most sense. We have evidence for that kind of thing happening in real life. Literally, the pharaoh that you suggested, like his family and stuff, had that. Like, man, like they at least just bound their heads, but it seemed like they shared interesting physiology together. So like, just an abandonment of whatever skepticism actually means, and just going with like, man, this would be fucking cool.
I remember hearing a theory a long time ago that the people that gave us civilization at Göbekli Tepe were the first human Neanderthal hybrids. Their strange genetic makeup allowed them unique physical...
It's just much lower. I had seen 0% on the DNA things, but I guess, I don't know for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if if Neanderthal DNA shares aspects, obviously, since they came from the same area. But I think what they mean is like there's no like after that split. I could be wrong, but it would make a lot of sense because they split when, as a species, they moved from sub-Saharan Africa outward into the northern lands, and then white skin would certainly help in snowy areas to not get. It's a white rabbit situation, for the record, in my opinion. Also melanin production and stuff, sunlight, shit like that. But like, I guarantee you, just not being killed by fucking predators as easily, because you don't stand out quite as much, helped. Why does my Twitch censor Neanderthal? Mine doesn't on this side. Allowed in my chat.
Physiology, including...
By the way, the lamps look fucking awesome today. Everyone say Brooke did a good job on the 420 overlay, by the way. Because she did. Isn't it dope in here? Thank you, Brooke.
Tall stature and oversized brains, allowing them to sort of think outside of the box from what humanity was used to. I didn't really think much of that at the time and kind of just forgot it. However, I started looking into another Homo species that was contemporary to the Cro-Magnon and the Neanderthal called Homo denisovin, or Homo denisovin. The Denisovin lived mostly in Asia. From the fragments of their bones and teeth that we found, these humans were absolutely massive. Their molars were so large that the earliest researchers dismissed them as bear teeth. In fact, their molars have twice the surface area of a modern human, meaning that these Denisovans could have been as much as 3 times the mass of a modern Homo sapien, like a giant. Okay, take a breath, everyone. Why don't you pause the video, go get a drink or something, because it's going to start to get heavy. One of the ways that our true history and our true nature is hidden from us is that we're kept distracted.
Lighter skin absorbs vitamin D from the sun better. That's why Northern Europeans have lighter hair and skin. Well, yeah, but I'm sure that also the selection pressure gets reduced when you aren't starkly contrasted with the environment. You feel me? But yes, you're right. I think it has. I think it has lots of evolution's cool. And you can see people's skin tones shift with the environment a lot of the time. Very interesting. Like meridian, like right in the middle across the whole world in a horizontal line, all 360. And then you go to the edges and people look different. Not 100%, but like often. And then you can see where contiguous landmass, you can see where people look. You can also go from Africa and just sweep. And like if you imagine people spread out from Africa, which they did, you can just branch out and you can look in your head. This is how this is one of the things that helped me get through to some Christians on evolution, actually. Is just think of human beings and what they look like, and just think about what the average person looks like from sub-Saharan Africa and into the Middle East, and then out into the Mediterranean. Then you can go east, west, north, and then that it changes. You know what I mean? Like you clearly like bloom out. You could do a color map just on like not even on like shared features, but just skin tone. And I guarantee you it would be like a pretty smooth gradient for the most part. And then when there wasn't, I bet you could see big historical events that would explain why that's not the case. Very interesting. Super cool to think about. Although I guess this leads some racists to think how evolution works. That like, because they associate north with the top, they're like, oh, that's white people are the best. Because that's how the evolution tree works, right? The best is at the top.
It's cold.
Do you think it's just if they were in the South and it just got cold in the South, this would all be different? I don't think so. Capera omnis. Omnis? Thanks for following.
And fighting with each other based on a very narrow historical view. I'm not saying that we need to forget about our modern history. It's still very much relevant. But today, I'm challenging you to open your mind to a broader context of our...
Paul Salopek is walking out of Africa to South America. He's an anthropologist and has been walking for 9 years. He's not in China. Wow, that's cool. He's now in China. That's interesting. A rare sighting. A rare sighting, Mickey. Hi, buddy. Mickey, you some love? No, you just want some kibble? Okay, everyone be quiet. Oh, hi, buddy. Hi, Mickey. Oh. Got some Prince interactions. He's going to climb up there, and you're going to see Glorious Floof. Yeah, here he goes. Glorious Floof. Wow. What a prince. A princely king. Anyway. The teeth he mentioned are bogus, apparently. In size, the Denisovan teeth are more similar in size to those of ancient human ancestors who lived in Africa 2 to 3 million years ago, rather than those of humans or Neanderthals. Oh.
History. I've said this before, but race, too, is such a narrow way to look at humanity. Race only really refers to your general skin tone, facial features, hair type, nose shape, and whether or not you fit in with other ethnic groups. But your race doesn't explain who you are or where you came from. When we see different ethnic groups migrating across the globe, we see their influence being left behind, like a trail of breadcrumbs. We see the influence that they've left on the land and on the people and on the culture. They leave behind art, religion, language.
Just like the aliens that touched down.
DNA. When two cultures meet, whether it's on the friendliest or on the worst of terms, they almost always interbreed. Humanity has survived for hundreds of thousands of years by continuously intermingling and clashing with each other, creating more distinct ethnic groups that would eventually take over each other and mix with each other and change with each other until eventually we came to one genetic identity. Homo sapien. And in that same vein, racial mixing today is a good thing. It helps bolster our genetics. This is literally how evolution works. Because I'm half Irish, my genetics are a little...
It's such a weird... God, that sounded so... It was like making it palatable for Nazis to consume, the idea of inter-race mixing. It's good for our DNA, actually. Our genes will be better for it. Actually, it's really like, what a weird way. Oh, man.
Little on the recessive side. If I want to ensure that I have strong sons, I need to find a big, brown-skinned Amazon woman. I mean, it would be ideal if she was really able to kick my ass, you know what I'm saying? Even Alexander the Great, the most accomplished white Greek conqueror.
Greg has put me in the awkward position, kind of like a pickle, to talk about what he just said. I now have to describe to you why it's racist to describe yourself as pure white breeding stock, and then strongly requesting a sturdily built brown woman as your copulation partner. There's a lot of culture baked into that, Greg. We're going to skip it. I think most of you get it.
Told his generals after they took over Persia.
Oh, fuck.
To take Persian wives. I went more into depth
about... They told... Okay. Conquering nations would literally take wives as a way of cultural dominance because they knew it would work. The French did... I mean, every European nation did this. This is a tried and true... I mean, fucking medieval times they did that. That's why, I mean, Genghis Khan, like, content warning. Violence is a means to an end in ancient conquerings. Rape was often used as a long-term means of genetic dominance as well. The French, who founded Michigan, Detroit, the fort. I like to say this because my I had a history teacher. His name was Bill. I believe he's still alive. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he died. Bill demanded we called him Bill instead of like Mr. whatever his name was. Demanded we call him Bill, and he went on a rant once, and I never forgot about it. I don't know what the rant was. I never forgot how he said the founder of Detroit's name, Antoine Delamont Cadillac. And I'll never forget it. And he taught me that. So shout out Bill. What a weird guy. I have lots of stories about that guy. Anyway, the French have explicit writings, and many other cultures do too, including Alexander the Great. They wrote about making sure they take those wives, and it's very explicit. Like, they know it's not like a secret evil plot. It's an outspoken evil plot to literally take those wives and to Christianize them, to whiten their babies, and to propagate and like literally delete their culture, and to like Europeanize whatever the culture might be, Americanize the savage whatever they're colonizing. The British did this, the Americans did this. Fucking everybody did it. Portuguese, French, Italians, Spanish. Anyway, not aliens is the point. We did it to them ourselves. These people did that. It was all bad.
This in my video, inside we're all black. Even though we seem to be racially very different, basically our racial differences are meaningless. The gene pool of the human species is worryingly shallow. Humans are so genetically similar today that our offspring are extremely predictable. If a white man marries a black woman, then the stork will bring them a brown baby. That's science. But species mixing is not so straightforward. Science. If a sapien man marries a Neanderthal woman, then the stork's like, I don't know what to do. Nature allows for some species mixing if the species are similar enough, but it doesn't really have proper contingencies for it. For example, this is a liger, a mix between a lion and a tiger. In the wild, the tiger is the largest cat. However, in captivity, the liger is the largest cat. The liger is not just larger, it's cartoonishly larger.
Big old puss
is a tigon.
That's a zebra and a tiger. That's science.
A tigon is basically genetically the same thing as a liger, but a tigon shows completely different traits. A tigon has stripes and a mane, and the tigon is only about as big as a lion. Really, a tigon is just a lion with tiger stripes. Kind of boring in comparison. So how does this happen exactly? First of all, it's rare enough that interspecies mixing results in a viable offspring in the first place, but it's even more rare that that offspring ends up fertile and able to have their own children. But ligers and tigons are a special case. A liger is the result of a male lion mating with a female tiger. A tigon is the result of a male tiger mating with a female lion. It's believed that in lions, the female passes on the genetic trait that tells the body when to stop growing. And in tigers, it's the male that passes on the genetic trait that tells the body when to stop growing. So ligers are never given that genetic signal to stop growing, and they just grow forever, whereas tigons get that genetic signal twice. So keep that in mind, all right? The first humans to leave Africa were the Homo erectus. By this point,
me too.
Humans had fire, tools, and weapons. They mostly lived in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia.
I'm only a half-mast right now, though.
But some made it to Europe as well. Then came Homo heidelbergensis around 600 or 500,000 years ago. This is when things really start to change for humanity.
Okay. Do you want to know how high I am right now? Don't interrupt me, Meek, with your 65 biddies. Don't fucking interrupt me. Does Greg believe this shit? No, he believes it. Do you want to know my genuine... This is fucking true. This is why I started... I don't know if you could see my reaction. If you were paying attention to my face, I started just smiling and chuckling. When I saw this guy, my genuine reaction... Because this is how high I am. This is where I'm at. I looked at him and I thought, wow, he has kind eyes. He looks like a nice guy. Good job, person who made this model.
Heidelberg basically took over everywhere, and we're reasonably sure that Homo sapien and Homo neanderthal both evolved from separate Homo Heidelberg groups.
Yeah, it looks like he has something to say, you know?
Evolved
he looks like he's interested in the conversation.
Down in Africa, of course, while Homo neanderthal evolved up in Europe and Asia. However, at the same time, a third Homo group evolved in the Far East.
My chat. No?
The Homo denisovin. And though denisovin also evolved from heidelbergensis, just like sapien and Neanderthal, it appears as if their DNA didn't actually drift that far from heidelbergensis. We expected that their DNA might be more like Neanderthal, but it ended up being way more like heidelbergensis, which means that it's possible that Homo denisovin looked almost identical or indistinguishable from the Homo heidelbergensis, maybe even more similar than Homo sapien looks to Homo neanderthal. We have no idea what they looked like. We've only found fragments of their bones. We don't even know what their skull was shaped like, but we do know that they were very large compared to modern humans. In fact, around 100,000 years ago, it seems as if gigantism was quite common. And 100,000 years ago, this is around the time when Earth is the most like the Lord of the Rings. You got the kingdom of man coming up from Africa. Then you've got the red-headed dwarf people in Europe. And there's even a hobbit around this time, Homo floresiensis. And just like the white elves, there's a huge army of corrupt dark elves.
Okay, yeah. I think this is why Greg believes this shit. I think Greg believes this shit because he thinks it's cool. Like, it's interesting. He's like, oh, it's fucking cool. I'm gonna believe this. Oh yeah, wouldn't it be cool if this? Then it must be real. And in the process of it, he just put an orc and this guy on screen at the same time. Oop. Okay. It's going just fine, isn't it? I know look, the intent is obviously he's just running away with it and he's having some good old innocent fun. But god damn it, dude. Just a little bit of just a run through it one more time. When was this? It's 3 years old, 2020. Who boy? We were on one right now. Oh fuck! April of 2020. Oh fuck. Oh shit! No wonder it happened. Oh jeez. Okay. Fuck. Does he have long COVID?
There are these terrible giants that are roaming the earth. I left a link in the description to an interview Professor Lee Berger from the University of Witwatersrand. It isn't really common knowledge, but a lot of the skeletons they were pulling out of the earth from around 100,000 years ago, on average, were over 7 feet tall. So we know for sure of the existence of at least 3.
I actually do not think that was... I think maybe it was a common like genetic quirk that maybe there were more tall people, but like those people exist right now all over the place. They play basketball. You should see them. You want to see just like, okay, Bol. What type of man? I think I've used an example of him before. I think of him because of he's specifically shaped. I could also think of one other one. I'm going to show you Chet Holmgren next. Bol. He's just like a huge man. His dad was a huge man. He's a big, oh, this is a picture of his dad. Big Manute Bol. This is Manute Bol, the tallest NBA player at 7'7" or some shit like that. Again, standing next to Spud Webb, one of the shortest at 5'6", I believe, at the time. And I'm right here in the middle. There's me. Anyway, there's also Chet Holmgren. Holmgren. He has the same shit going on. He's a big, tall, lanky young fella. He's just like, here you go. This is a good reference. Just that's a normal size, like tall man. It's like this guy's like 6'5". And this is Chet Holmgren, which is big lanky dude. These people exist. This guy's 6'8". He just looks well proportioned. Really, he looks like a man, and Chet looks like a man mixed with one of, it must be the Atlanteans, I think. Obviously, that's what happened. It's pretty clear. His mom's a mermaid. Look at it. You can tell by his gills.
3 different Denisovan groups that
anyway,
migrated
tall people
across
exist.
Asia.
This isn't
they
weird.
might have even been.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were big and strong, and if they made it into adulthood, they'd have a higher likelihood of surviving, right? Because people would probably fucking, lean on that person for protection, and also, like, but a lot of them died all the time because, like, it's a lot of calories. You need a lot of food for that. Anyway, tall people existing is not weird.
3 different species of Denisovan. And we know
Nephilim,
for
more
sure
likely.
that
You're
their
right.
descendants ended up
You're right, my
migrating
bad.
down through the Indonesian island chain. There's an ethnic group that exists there today that has the most Denisovan DNA of any ethnic group on Earth. And guess what?
He licking. He's slurping.
They have blonde hair.
Cool.
Isn't that interesting? So by using
what a fucking weird. Just look at this clip. Look at this.
Guess what?
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna set this up. Nobody talk. Nobody do anything. Okay.
Ethnic group on Earth. And guess what? They have blonde hair.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Isn't that interesting? So, by using our skills of deduction, if there is a Homo sapien ethnicity existing today with Denisovan DNA, then that means at one point in history, there had to have been sapien Denisovan hybrids.
You should have addressed your tone in this. Your vibe is so weird in this discussion. He's just a weird guy.
What do you think those looked like?
I guess
it's
statues.
believed that Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal began mixing somewhere around 50,000 years ago. So it's reasonable, I think, to assume that Denisovan was also mixing with Neanderthal and Sapien at the same time. We've recently found a really good example of a Neanderthal-Sapien hybrid. She's apparently from around 30,000 years ago. This is also supposedly around the same time that Neanderthal went extinct. Hybrids have been around for at least 20,000 years at this point. But really, we don't even know when the last hybrids would have gone extinct. And the 30,000 year mark is also interesting because it's also this time in history that some really crazy shit starts popping up in Europe, including this iconic burial site. Now, their burial uniforms are surprisingly intricate, including thousands of beads carved from mammoth tusks.
Whoa.
This shows a level of sophistication that we didn't really know that humans had 30,000 years ago.
Oh, all that tells me is that they had a culture where people had a lot of idle time. So they probably had to prep for winters and not do a lot of stuff. Normal stuff. Like, literally think of that for 2 seconds. Beads? Beads? Like, nomadic people have beads. And if they had a lot of the material that they make the beads out of, and if they particularly, like if the person was particularly important, yeah, they could have spent time doing this, a mourning period doing it. Like, man, it's so weird. It's cool, though. This is cool.
And it's cool to see their ceremonies, like burying their dead with spears and other items. This jaw shape, one of the most amazing skulls I have ever seen.
We know that Denisovans were at least as advanced as Homo sapiens.
What's that guy's name? In Django, what was his name? Calvin Candy. I couldn't remember the character's name. I mean, grab the fucking Phrenology kit. This movie has one of those he kicked it and he broke his toe during the take. I don't like how fucking much this piece of deviant art seems to idolize Calvin Candy, if I'm honest. Anyway,
if not more so. For example, Wikipedia says that humanity discovered the drill somewhere around 35,000 BC. Well, this Denisovan bracelet is at least 8,000 years older than that.
Cool,
and it has an extremely precise drill hole. And the oldest sewing needle ever was discovered in the same Denisovan cave. Remains also show that these people were living in harmony with and even breeding with a group of Neanderthal.
So it took one group of people having a stable place to stay, probably food nearby. This doesn't have upkeep to it. You know what I mean? You just got to protect the front of it. You got to stay warm and sheltered. They had downtime. This is when people create things. This is when those inventions happen. This is the perfect storm. I'm not surprised to see that. When you're surprised to see that would be like in the middle of the desert without like fucking permanent shelter and insufficient food. This is normal though.
Though isolated, these were an extremely advanced people.
Hybrid is a really wishy-washy term to use. Technically, this guy is a Neanderthal hybrid. So think about this. 30,000 years ago, we have sapien Neanderthal hybrids in Eurasia, as well as sapien Denisovan hybrids in Siberia and the Far East. Now get this, we used to believe that the first humans to cross the land bridge from Siberia into North America was around the last ice age, about 13,000 or 12,000 years ago. But there was a group of researchers that thought it had to have been much earlier. It was recently confirmed by artifacts found in a sinkhole that humans might have crossed the land bridge as far back as 25,000 years ago. I guarantee hybrids crossed that bridge.
Hybrids.
There are strange artifacts in North America from a culture that we know.
He guarantees it. He guarantees it.
As the mound builders.
But even it doesn't matter. Cool. I mean, maybe. Why is this significant?
We call them the mound builders because they built earth mounds.
Thanks, man.
It's pretty simple. But we don't really know much about them, other than they were clearly ethnically distinct from the native groups that we know of today. So my theory is that the mound builders were the first humans that crossed the land bridge 25,000 years ago. However, they were being led by a group of Denisovan hybrids. There's several native...
Led by a group? Why do they have to be led by groups? It's so weird. He's like, race isn't a big deal, but every time he talks about it, they delineate based on it.
Tribes in North and South America that have stories of tribes of giants. Even though the Smithsonian denies it, there are several stories of people finding giant skeletons in or near these mounds or on their farm property. Even though it ends up in the newspaper and it becomes public knowledge, the Smithsonian will then come and collect the giant bones and then just pretend that it never happened. There are dozens of stories like that. There are, however, a few confirmed giant skeletons, and these people might have also have become the Olmec, which was a culture that existed where the Mayan culture was before the Mayans. And the cultures, again, don't seem to be related. They have these giant bath salt or granite heads that they definitely should not have been
Yeah, of course there are.
able to work on. And though the granite heads seem pretty ethnically similar to the natives that live in North and South America today, their depictions of their cone-headed babies. And they also liked to depict faces. Some of them look very, very Asian, way more Asian than modern natives. They created figurines, and those figurines have freaking cone heads.
I mean, there's probably the land bridge. There's probably some shared DNA aspects. It's just so weird how you phrase that shit. It is so weird how you phrase that shit. Why? Like, the tone is so odd, man.
Unfortunately, the Peruvian coneheads didn't immortalize themselves with statues, at least none that we can find. It's hard to tell because the Paracas and Inca people were basically slaughtered by the Nazca people. They famously made that giant alien on the side of the mountain, and that was them basically trying to get the giant albinos to come back. But we do find...
How the fuck? What? Please come back, giant albinos, is what that means? How the fuck does that make sense?
Find later in the Inca period
like this guy.
that they created these brass figures.
Oh, that one has a peepee.
Wouldn't you know it? They look an awful lot like
ding
the
dings.
Easter Island statues.
Nobody else
then
has
later
ding
in
dings.
Mescala, Mexico, we see the same style, but
did you say these look like the Easter Island one? Do they? They're holding their titties and they got ding dings. That's girl dick. What are you talking about?
Statues.
These are different.
Then later in Mescala, Mexico, we see the same style but kind of devolved. And what I find interesting about the Mezcala is we find here again another unique feature. There are several of them that are designed with a crooked or a cocked head. And this again confirms my theory that each of these figurines and each of these statues was supposed to represent a specific person. Clearly this was somebody who was born with a birth defect that made him walk around with his head sideways all the time.
or it could have a million other cultural reasons. A million. Like, it doesn't always... Like, it could just be like they had some symbology by people who lean to the left or lean to the right, or people who fucking have their heads tilted. It could have, like, so many different things. It could just be a quirk of the stone they worked with. It could be their... Whoops. Carved the fucking stone wrong. Like, there's so many ways to go about this, man. Is this Armored Skeptic? No, this is Greg. He's no longer a skeptic. Yeah, it's Armored Skeptic.
They probably would have recognized him as the crooked-headed god.
Yeah,
they also had a sitting version, which is
know.
eerily similar to the wooden carving that we see from the Australian.
That's so similar. Look how fucking similar that is. Exactly the same, in my opinion.
Islands. Later, the Mayans would create their own sitting version
of
but
people.
Most bizarre,
Holy
the
shit.
Diqui culture from Costa Rica. These are exactly like the OG statues from the Middle East.
They're not exactly like that. They are depicting humans still, and they're all a little different. And they have hallmarks of, like, the fucking eyes are different on all of them. The noses are different on all of them. The way that they do the shoulders is different. Like, the feet are different. Like, they're not even, like, these are conjoined. He's have a thigh gap. These are two. Like, they have arms. These depict the fingers. These have those fucking chevrons that you care a lot about. Like, there's hallmarks of... These are statues, and they depict humans. This one's got a ding-ding.
So I think that even though humans crossed the land bridge 12,000 years ago, the culture of the Coneheads and their religion didn't, and landed on the coast of Peru 3,000 years ago. There they met the natives, who by then had already been in the Americas for 9,000 years. I can do math in my head. And this is where you get the story of the ancient aliens giving them the knowledge to farm and to create a civilization. Okay, so we know...
Again, he's putting the big, strong, white people delivering... Like, it's not different. You just made them terrestrial. Ancient terrestrials.
That the Conehead culture went from the Middle East, down south and across the ocean to South America. We also know that they clearly went down to Africa because the pharaohs and the Akhenaten tradition. But do you think maybe...
Good Beard TV. Thanks, Fawn Dude.
A group went through Europe too? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. Now, this is actually the most mysterious group in human history. Whoa. They were masters of the sea, rulers of the Mediterranean.
Are you gonna say the Sea Peoples? The Iron Age collapse? Lindengrow. Thanks for following, dude. Jesus. Goodbeard TV. Thanks for the raid, my friend. Appreciate it.
They were known as the Sea People.
These are... Okay.
Or...
Joey the Bastard. We're in my wheelhouse now, baby.
The Phoenicians. Every single Phoenician is depicted with a cone head. Every single one of them. Now we're talking way later,
say Atlanteans.
long after the Denis.
Oh my god, the Atlanteans are actually the Sea Peoples. Classic! Classic!
It has to do?
Smooth cringe. Thanks for the 100 biddies. Grizzler guy. Wowzers. This seemed to just be a group of bandits, or a culture that used boats to attack people effectively during the Iron Age or the Bronze Age collapse. The Bronze Age collapse took place at the end of the Bronze Age, and it was essentially like, you know, an apocalypse event around the fucking like Mad Max type living style for decades, like 100 years, longer, hundreds of years. During the Bronze Age, and the Sea Peoples were a group of people that used watercraft to raid coastal cities, and they gained a reputation, and they are mysterious, but they are certainly not Atlanteans. Please don't say that they're Atlanteans, Greg.
Denisovans and the hybrids and the albinos and the Aryans and whatever you want to call them are gone. The ruling class of the Phoenicians seem to be descendants of the hybrids and are maintaining their traditions in the Mediterranean. In a future video, I'm going to explain who these people were, how they swept across Europe and changed the world forever. To make things a little bit more complicated, there's a separate native group in the Australian islands near New Zealand known as the Maori. The Maori showed up much later than the Aboriginals, and they're ethnically distinct, more Polynesian. There's one particular tribe in New Zealand that often is born with red or blonde hair, blue or green eyes, and they seem to have a completely different history from every other Maori group. They fled South America when the blondes and redheads were persecuted and were forced to cross the Polynesian islands through Easter Island, which is probably where they created the Easter Island heads, and then down to New Zealand, where they ended up creating a new culture. I'm leaving a link in the description to this documentary, but to make a long story short, this woman claims that her people left Egypt, sailed to the Americas, lived there thousands of years, then sailed across the Pacific Ocean, and then eventually landed in New Zealand. And though she never uses the term Phoenician, I believe that their arriving in the Americas about 3,000 years ago coincides with the Phoenicians' time in the Americas. There are a ton of other oddities from around the world.
What did the DNA test show? That sounds, by the way, like Mormon. Mormons have a similar belief about Jews, about the is it actually Abraham? I can't remember the Mormon myth. I can't remember. No, it's not Abraham, but it is descendants, right? And they got all the way to fucking like Missouri. Lehigh, thank you. Greg used to be an atheist, but now he's trying to espouse this path. Yeah, I mean, he's gone off the deep end, man.
Though things that would put Ripley's Believe It or Not to fucking shame. Like the Boskop skull. This is pieced together based on fragments that we found in southern Africa. I pray to fucking God that this was just a birth defect and that there's not like a whole species of these things.
Oh, what the fuck?
Jesus Christ. But based on the fragment, they would have had an enormous cranium and a tiny face. Just like a little alien guy. And then there's this bizarre mummy that was found in the United States.
You gotta get into some shit.
Only about 3 feet tall or so. And luckily this is a Tyrion Lannister type of a conehead, just a genetic defect from inbreeding too much. And then there's this guy. This is really creepy. He's only as long as my hand, but he appears, based on his teeth and skeletal structure, to be around 6 years old. And the DNA is native South American.
And she had a significant amount of European DNA as well. This is significant because it's a
primordial dwarfism? Never heard of that. Let's see it. Primordial dwarfism. Oh wow, yeah. I recognize it though. Very little. Let me give an example. This is much smaller than that, but I mean, that is quite small. This has always looked very fake to me. I don't know if it is fake or not. It's just, I feel like conspiracy theorist people post this image.
Officially believed that European DNA wasn't introduced to the Americas until Columbus landed, but apparently many of the elongated skulls have DNA that comes from haplogroups that are exclusive to Europe and the Middle East.
So yeah, good luck sleeping tonight. So in conclusion, I think I pretty much proved that the first people, at least the first civilizations,
what did he prove?
Were governed by a non-same.
How did you prove that they were governed by anybody? What the fuck? You certainly did not do that. You floated the general idea of conehead people existing, but you have not enforced their status? Or that they were governed? Like, there's no reason to believe that the people actually had skulls like that. There's like some of them obviously did. It happened in some locations, some places, but like the Easter Islands, like you're just saying anything that's like vaguely like this is just wacky, dude. This is just wacky stuff.
Sapien, human species, completely distinct from modern man. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, I've proven it. However, as smart and as great and as capable and as strong and as large as these people were, they're not around anymore. They're a failed species. But it's probably a good thing that they're gone. Because for all the technology
and why do you think that is?
The
I know why I think it is. The easiest, most simplest answer, I think I know.
Knowledge and the civilization that they gave us,
I can give you a few
they also
answers.
Subjugated us. And
They subjugated us?
single one of these cultures.
They didn't There's no evidence of this. None. Mr. Whiskers, Thanksgiving went to cannibalism. Actually, it's cannibalism.
Every single one of these tribes, their story ends with the natives rising up and slaughtering the rulers. We killed them off, and we became our own gods.
Yeah, they are
to show
coneheads,
that
not
no matter
lava
how
lamps.
accomplished and perfect a people may seem to be, they may still fail to survive. They may still fail to pass their genes on to the future. The Denisovans' DNA was not long for this world. And as they said at the end of Lord of the Rings, it's now the time of man. All the others are gone. Wait, do you think Lord of the Rings was about this shit? But many of us still carry the traits of Denisovan, and some of us even clearly have their DNA markers. In fact, many of us might be direct descendants of them and not even know it. Hell, some of them might be direct descendants of them and know it. Oh my god! But don't go thinking that because you have Denisovan DNA or Aryan DNA, that means that you're in some way superior. You're not. You're not them. That was Hitler's mistake.
I won't make Hitler's mistake. While I do agree with him, of course.
Yeah, his one mistake. Hitler was so obsessed with albino features that he was venerating blonde hair and blue eyes. He wasn't trying to bring back the traditions of the Coneheads. He was trying to bring back the Coneheads. Aryan doesn't even mean white. The Iranians believe they're Aryan. That's what Iran means. Aryan. The Aryans are gone. Aryan features can be seen in several ethnicities from around the world. I've seen it in India, China even. I want you to Google this. You'd be surprised to find out that there are hundreds of examples of blonde and red-headed mummies all around the world. But Hitler, he went all around the globe trying to find signs of them. One of the places he went to were the mountains of Tibet. And this actually perplexed me until I realized about a month ago that the Tibetan mountains were the second place on Earth that they found Denisovan DNA. What a coincidence. From the mitochondrial DNA we've examined in the Siberian Denisovan cave, we know for sure that there are several ethnic groups in the Eastern Hemisphere who still show Denisovan DNA markers. Believe it or not, that includes 3 separate native tribes in South America. Not too far from where we find elongated skulls. But like I said, it seems as if the people who have the most Denisovan DNA are concentrated in the Indonesian island chain, mostly these blonde-haired people. So I connected a lot of the dots on this.
This is not a picture of one of those people.
Did they show any signs of this religion in the Philippines or the Indonesian islands at all? Yeah. This is actually my favorite example. It's supposedly only about 1,200 years old, but it's clearly a cone head holding his wiener. So,
but who gives a fuck about the dating?
Is that the culture coming back up? No. I don't think so. That thing is either older than we're told, or that religion ended up lasting like 10,000 years.
Or someone made a statue that reminds you of a different thing and it has no real connection. Or they saw one of the statues you're talking about and they recreated it. I mean, it still just looks like a fucking guy and he has a dick.
Now I scoured this island chain for days. I found white ones, I found cone-headed ones with big brows. But could I find one with big, gauged ears?
He's literally gonna mic drop? Oh my fucking god, dude. I'm so fucking embarrassed for you. That is just... So the unequivocal fucking... Is it unequivocal? He's broken my brain. The proof is that you found a statue with gauged ears. Found one of them. If you just find one, that's a link.
It has the juice?
I just have no idea how this guy ever thought he was a skeptic. He said in the last video, or was it the beginning of this video? Maybe it was the very beginning of this, that he... Actually, it might have been the last one. He said essentially that the Bible was untrue and he moved forward. And now he's come full circle. I think maybe it was this one. And what atheists that are atheists because the Bible is untrue are like really weak atheists. Like not that we're purity testing necessarily, but it's like when the math professor says show your work so that they know how you got the answer correct. The Bible being not true is not why you should be an atheist. It's why you shouldn't be a Christian. Why you shouldn't be an atheist is other fundamental stuff about monotheism separate from the cult of Christianity, you know what I mean? Like, or from any other, whatever you're an apostate from, Mormonism, Islam, whatever. Like, but obviously Greg didn't get to that point and like synthesize what that meant. He just was like, I'm not this religion anymore. And then he like glommed onto another belief because it was cool to him. It's interesting. It is cool and interesting. What if we had orcs, chat? But we don't. We have us and a real life. And the real story, our anthropological history is so much more interesting than the made up shit. I don't know why you would go through the trouble to like be like, oh, and actually all these cultures were linked by a god cult of Aryan conehead whites that gave them the secret information. Like, it's totally possible that there were some cave folks that were like albino or white or cone-headed or whatever that did give someone some information. But isn't it so interesting to think of like these tribes of people that get essentially socially isolated, and then you stumble across another group of people who probably look very different from you because of just how genes work and the isolation. Because, you know, before civilizations really settled down, it'd be rare to run into other people that look a lot like you that you weren't already part of your shit. Anyway, I think it's just wild that we're on like, well, it's not ancient aliens. They were terrestrial aliens. They were coneheads. They were a mutated species of super people. That's what it was. And they were the ones that guided the lesser races, and then somehow they died. I'm excited for what's the next one? Let's see what the next one is. How the Giants built Atlantis. Let's fucking go. I'm ready. I'm ready for the Atlantis, Greg. But that'll be next time. That's the end of this one.